Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're jumping right in to unpack exactly how human actions are shifting our global climate. But we're not just talking about abstract computer models or melting ice caps today. We're going to get detailed and focus on something much closer to home: how those shifts are creating direct, severe, and measurable impacts on our physical health. We're looking at the clear, simple, and concrete realities happening to human bodies right now. So, here is our roadmap for today. We'll start with the human-made blanket, then look at how the climate changes, dive deep into the human health crisis, break down the vulnerability equation, and finally, wrap up with adapting to our future.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, the human-made blanket.
Okay, quick question for you. Have you ever wondered why sitting inside a parked car on a sunny day feels like an absolute oven, even if there's a really cool breeze outside? Well, the visible light from the sun easily passes right through the glass windows, heating up the dark seats and the dashboard. But that heat, it can't easily pass back out through the glass. It just gets trapped, and the interior temperature spikes drastically within minutes. That exact car window phenomenon, that is the greenhouse effect on a planetary scale. Invisible gases in our atmosphere act just like a giant blanket, or that car windshield, trapping the Earth's radiating heat instead of letting it escape into the cold vacuum of space. The Earth absorbs solar energy and re-radiates it as infrared heat. Now, natural gases usually keep our global temperature perfectly balanced, but we humans, we're pumping excess, long-lasting gases like carbon dioxide and methane into the air. We are, effectively, throwing a second, much thicker blanket onto the bed. So what exactly are humans doing to thicken this blanket? It really comes down to four main everyday activities that release enormous amounts of these gases. The primary drivers are our global transportation network burning fossil fuels and our massive agricultural systems. Specifically, we're talking about methane from livestock and nitrous oxide from industrial fertilizers. Add to that heavy industrial manufacturing and the sheer massive energy required just to heat and cool our buildings globally. These aren't just rogue, isolated actions, right? They are deeply baked into how our modern society functions every single day.
Moving right along to Section 2, how the climate changes.
Let's look at a really crucial number here: 440. For literally thousands of years, our natural atmospheric carbon dioxide levels sat at a highly stable 250 parts per million. But human activity has aggressively driven that number up to an alarming 440 today. To put that massive jump into perspective, our human ancestors evolved, built entire civilizations, and thrived entirely within that stable 250 range. Bumping it up to 440 means we are currently forcing the Earth's systems to absorb an incredible amount of excess thermal energy. We are in totally uncharted territory here. And once that excess energy is in the system, it builds into these runaway feedback loops. Think of the Arctic. Highly reflective white ice acts like a giant mirror, bouncing solar radiation harmlessly away. But as the Earth warms, that ice melts, exposing the dark, heat-absorbing stone and ocean underneath. That dark surface acts just like wearing a black t-shirt on a sunny summer day. It completely soaks up the heat. And that newly absorbed heat melts even more ice, which exposes more dark rock. It's a self-amplifying cycle that, once triggered, basically continues entirely on its own. But here's the thing, this extra heat doesn't just raise the thermostat, it fundamentally alters our entire water cycle. Like Dr. Adam Levy points out, a hotter atmosphere acts like a giant sponge that can hold significantly more water vapor. Because of this, moisture is violently sucked out of some regions, which causes those intense, prolonged droughts and wildfires we keep hearing about, and it's held up in the sky. When that massive heavy sponge is finally squeezed, it dumps that water massively in other regions, unleashing historic, catastrophic floods. Literally, when it rains, it pours.
Which brings us to Section 3, the human health crisis. This is where the impacts get very real and very personal.
Because of these environmental shifts, we are witnessing alarming, unprecedented global health emergencies. First off, tropical vector-borne diseases like dengue fever are expanding right into new temperate zones, where local doctors have absolutely zero training in how to treat them. Second, the constant burning of fossil fuels releases fine particulate matter. Think about this. Right now, 9 out of 10 children globally breathe polluted air. This leads to severe respiratory diseases, alarming neurological issues during early development, and an estimated 7 million premature deaths every single year. Doctors are even reporting a horrifying new trend where they actually have to cancel life-saving surgeries just because patients' lungs are too compromised by daily air pollution to safely undergo anesthesia.
Now, here is a surprisingly specific and honestly deeply concerning health vulnerability that you rarely hear about. During extreme heat waves in the UK, doctors noticed a sudden, massive influx of mental health emergencies and fatalities. Well, it turns out necessary psychiatric medications can severely impair the human body's natural thermal regulation. Basically, it messes with your fundamental ability to sweat and cool down. So a patient might desperately need their daily medication to maintain their mental health, but that very same pill turns an unexpected heat wave into a lethal physiological threat. It's a profound hidden health crisis that directly stems from these rising temperatures. And these compounding crises make extreme weather incredibly visceral. The health impacts of climate change are not gender neutral, and they are for sure not equal. Back in 2000, during severe flooding in Mozambique, a pregnant woman was forced to literally climb into the branches of a tree to escape the violently rising waters, and she delivered her newborn baby right there in the tree. When we talk about abstract global temperature metrics on a chart, we have to remember that those degrees translate directly to raw human survival stories, like a mother seeking refuge above floodwaters just to bring a new life into the world.
Let's look at Section 4, the vulnerability equation.
To truly wrap our heads around our risk, we have to look at the nuanced reality of human choice. Environmental journalist Andrew Revkin actually coined a brilliant, simple equation for this. Risk equals hazard multiplied by exposure. The hazard is the natural event, the storm, the heat wave, the flood. But the exposure, that is entirely us. It's how many people are in the way, how much wealth is sitting on the coast, and how physically vulnerable those populations are. A Category 5 hurricane hitting an empty, barren island carries zero human risk. But hit a densely populated coastline, the risk absolutely explodes. Think of it kind of like playing darts. Global warming is definitely making the natural darts slightly bigger and sharper. But humans, we are drastically increasing our exposure by painting massive, expanding bullseyes directly on the dartboard. Take the Florida coastline, for example. In 1940, there were roughly 600,000 houses there. Today, there are over 17 million homes, and so many of them are built directly in historic flash flood alleys or known hurricane zones. So when we ask why disaster damages and death tolls are skyrocketing, yes, the climate storms are intensifying. But a huge part of the equation is simply that we keep placing millions more people directly in the line of fire. And unfortunately, exposure is heavily driven by poverty. A super revealing study from Carnegie Mellon showed exactly how economic vulnerability acts as a massive threat multiplier. Wealthier households, they just turn up the air conditioning when it gets hot. They essentially buy their way out of the hazard. But lower-income households wait. They delay turning on the AC to save on crushing electricity bills, and they end up suffering through indoor temperatures 4 to 7 degrees hotter. In a severe heat wave, that delay is deadly. It forces asthmatic children and elderly residents with weak hearts to push their bodies to the absolute breaking point before seeking relief.
Okay, let's pivot to solutions in Section 5, adapting to our future.
So, how do we actively adapt and shrink that expanding bullseye? The solutions involve really practical resilience. Did you know the global healthcare sector itself accounts for about 3.5% of global emissions? So decarbonizing and greening our medical facilities, like equipping hospitals in Egypt with independent solar panels, is a massive first step. Other solutions are shockingly simple. Just bringing nature back into concrete cities by planting robust tree canopies lowers the ambient temperature naturally, which straight up saves lives during heat waves. Couple that with smart, strict zoning laws that physically stop developers from building homes in known floodplains, and we drastically reduce our own exposure overnight.
It's really easy to look at all this data and fall into despair, thinking it's just too late. But we have the absolute power right now to stop making the impact worse. As climate scientist Dr. Adam Levy brilliantly reminds us, giving up because the Earth has already warmed is like choosing not to block the 13th punch to your face just because you've already been hit 12 times. 12 punches are still worse than 11. Every single fraction of a degree of warming we prevent saves millions of lives. Every adaptation we make secures our resilience.
The chain of impact starts with human action, but it also ends with human adaptation. Thank you for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, stay curious, and take action. Because knowing that we hold the power to dictate our exposure to the changing climate, what steps will you take to adapt your community today?